Hi, this is Phil. Welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to show you how I created my website in AOZ Studio. So this is the website where we've got various games and demos on the left-hand side here. And for each title, you've got the option here to play the title in a little pop-up box here. And you've also got the option to play it in full screen. You can download the AOZ project. You can preview the AOZ code. And you can also watch a tutorial video or a demo video depending on what the game title is. And there's other various links at the bottom here. So there's a privacy policy in a little pop-up. There's a news and update where you can subscribe to a newsletter, and then some other links there also. So let's see how this has been done in AOZ Studio. Let's create a new project. Website demo. Then what I'm going to do is copy some tags into here. Save me typing these in, a little code snippet. Let's just change the font size so it's easier for you to see. So to create the user interface, we can use the new designer tool. If we click this, that'll bring up the designer application. And this top right hand button will bring up the toolbar. You can see there's various components that we can add to the design canvas. So the user interface button, and this works very much like any designer tool would work. You can drag and drop things, you can resize. You can also use the properties to change these properties manually, and these can be used to fine-tune any sizes. You can actually type straight into there as well, and this works for all the components that are in here. It's also got the ability to delete. You can undo that, and you can make copies of components as well, which is quite useful. So let's start creating this user interface. So we'll start off with this title. So to display that, we can use this UI text block. And here we have the text block. And we want to update this text block content. So we change this here. And to change the font, we can use this font drop-down picker. And it's styliness 1 for this title. We also want to update the font, so we can increase the size. Let's resize that to fit. Let's just bring that down a little bit. And what you can also do in here, we've got the ability to change the class or the styling of the contents. So you can see by default you've got this text light class in there. Now that's a built-in class. Now you could change that to dark. That'll give you a darker text. You can change it to text primary, give you this blue color. These other various built-in classes. But what we want to do is keep that as text light, but we want to also recolor the A or Z part of this. Let's just sort out the positioning. You can see that this text is aligned to the left of this box. If we want to make sure that this title appears in the center of the screen, we can add a new class to this, and it's called text center. There's also another couple of little helper classes, so you could say text end, and that'll right align the text. By default, it's aligned to the left. So let's make this text center. If we hide the toolbox, we can position this and make the width the full width, so we know that that text is always going to be in the center. So before we go back to, before we close this off, if we try and close this, it'll tell us that we've not saved the changes. So we'll just say no to this, and we'll go back to the toolbox, and we'll see that there's this green button that says update the code editor. And then what that'll do is it'll update our source code with all the code required to recreate this screen. You can see there what it's added. It's actually added the Google font tag for us as well. And this is the procedure that we need to call to display that screen. So let's do that. Now, just to mention, we've got a comment here that says do not modify the contents of this procedure. It's not strictly true. You could go in here and change the ID of this. Call this text title. You could also change the name of the procedure if you needed to. We'll call this main screen. That's fine. But if you added non-UI components into this procedure, let's say that you just had a CLS 0 in there. When you go back to the designer, if you click the update code editor, it'll actually replace that store procedure. And it'll get rid of any additional code that you've added. So just bear that in mind when you're using the designer. So let's get this this screen displaying in our application. So all we need to do is call that procedure, and we just need a loop here just so that the application doesn't end. So there we go. If we run this application now, you'll see that that will display that screen, and we've just got the title there. So in order to create some custom CSS classes that we can apply to our content, let's create a new file under assets. We'll actually create a couple of new folders just to keep everything organized. We'll have one for CSS, and we're going to need some HTML files later in the project, so we'll create that now, HTML. Then under the CSS folder, create a new file. Call this main.css. Then here, we'll create a class. You do that starting off the class with a period, and we'll give it text AOZ. And we're going to use the AOZ, this orange color in here. So the color is going to be this value. So this is how you create a new class. It's pretty simple syntax. If you Google search cascading style sheets, that'll give you a load of information of what CSS is all about. But it's just a way of applying different styles to HTML content. So now we've got this class defined, we need to load that into the project. So we go back into our code, and we've got an instruction to do that, load CSS. And then if we go resources, assets, CSS, main.css. So now that this will get loaded, we can go back to the designer. If we double click the title, we can see that if we go into here and put text.aoz, get rid of that text light. Oops. See now it's all coloured as that new colour. And we don't want to do that. We actually want that to be light, and we only want to colorize the AOZ part. So this is pretty easy to do. Now, as I explained earlier, the content in here can be HTML. So in order to apply that style to the AOZ part, we can use some simple HTML to do that, and it's a span tag. So if we put span and we close that tag after there, we use a / to close that tag, like that. Now that that AOZ part is wrapped in this span, we can then add the class attribute to this. So we can say class equals, we'll put quotes, and then we'll give it that text.aoz class name. There you can see now that it's colorized that AOZ part. So we'll click the update on there, close this off. You can see in the code that it generates, it's actually put all that in for us. So it's pretty simple HTML. That's a way that you can apply your different classes that you can define. So the next thing that we want to add, we'll add these buttons on the left hand side. So we go back to the designer, add a new button, position that where we think it needs to be. We'll set the width to 320, the height to 70, and then we're going to change the appearance of the button. We'll use the built-in class btn. You can see there that the text has disappeared, and we want to use a different color on the text. So we'll create a new class. So let's just update this so we don't lose that change. Go back to our main CSS class. We'll say button text. We'll give that a color of hash CCCC. Back in the designer, you can see the buttons just about invisible. So if we add that class in here, button text, now we can see the button text appears, and we'll rename this to Cyblock. I'll change the font, luckiest guy, that's the one. I want the font size to be 30. Now, because we want to be able to run code when these buttons are clicked, you can see there's an on-click event handler here, and let's give this a name of title click. So what will happen is when we update the code, a new procedure will be created called title click. And we'll see that if we do that. You can see there, this is a procedure that will be called when that button's clicked. Get rid of this. So let's go back to the designer and add the remaining buttons. I'll just rename the ID for this to the value of 1. This will become the reason for this will become apparent later on, and I'll show you how we're going to be displaying the screenshots for each game title. So what we can do here is just copy each one of these. So I'll make a copy, reposition. This is button number 2, and the second game title is Cybernet. And I'll just repeat this for the remaining titles. So there we go, we've got all the buttons added. And if we click the update code editor, close that down, see all these UI buttons have been added. And if we run the project, you can see all the buttons are there. You can see there's none with the colour orange that's selected. If we look at the website, you can see as we select these, let me just turn that down a little. As you select these, the button style changes. So back in the code editor, if we go and find the title click procedure, what we can do in here is actually reference the button and change its style basically. So what we can do, say UI button, and next is going to be the ID. Now in this procedure, the ID of the button that was clicked is passed in. So you can see that these IDs here, I've got these numbers 1 to 9. So all we need to do is to say ID string. So that's going to reference the button that was clicked. I'm going to change the class property, and we're going to set it to the button, and we're going to use a built-in class called button warning. That'll give us the orange color. So if we run that now, as we click these, you can see that that style is being updated. And what we want to do is to reset all the other buttons back to the original style. Close this off. So we'll just do this in a for loop. So we can say for I equals 1 to 9. Then we're going to say UI button. And the ID is going to be the trim of the value of the string of I. So that'll give us the ID in the for loop. I'm going to set the class property back to button, and then it was button hyphen text, which was our custom class. If we run that now, we've now got the functionality that we require. So on the website, as each title is clicked, you can see there's a title there that gives the name of the title, and you've got some content underneath, and you've got these buttons. So let's recreate this part of the user interface in the designer. So let's add the game title first. We'll use a text block for this. And we're going to reposition this approximately there. And the font is going to be Stalinist 1. Just expand that a little. And we'll change the font size to 67, it's going to be, just looking at my notes, 65. And we'll just change the text in here. Set it to game title. And we're going to change the color of this, and we're going to use the AOZ color. So we'll call this text AOZ. Then underneath that title, we've got a row of buttons, but let's just give this a name first. We're going to reference this from code, so it'll make it more readable. I've already got a... let's rename this, call that page title. And this one we can call text title. So for the row of buttons, position that underneath. We're going to set the width and height to 100 and the font size to 30. And we're going to use an icon rather than some text so we can get rid of the content. And we can use the icon picker now. If we click this button and look for one called game. What's it called? Is it controller? There we go. So there's the icon there. Actually, let's change the font to 50. That's it, that's a better size. And then we're going to use a built-in class to style this button. So it's BTN, and we're going to go for BTN success. That'll give it a green colour. And for the click event, we'll call this play click. I'll just give it a name, play. I will also notice on here we've got this little tooltip that appears underneath. That's easy to configure. So we've got a tooltip here, so we can just say play. And we'll hover over that, you can see that it appears. Now it's defaulting to the right hand side, we want that to appear below. So we can change the tooltip placement. So we want that to appear at the bottom. Now the style of the tooltip can be restyled using CSS as well. So let me show you how to do that. So we go back to our CSS. And there's some code that I can copy in here. So rather than type all this in, so this is just some bootstrap styles that will override the default styles for the tooltip. So again, if you're interested in doing this, you can download the source code from my website for this website, and you can copy these in. So we go back here now. If we go back to the designer, you can see now that the tooltip has been restyled. So let's make a copy of this button, reposition that, and we want to change the icon. And this is going to be a full screen icon. And then we'll also change the name. Play full screen. And we'll change the event handler as well. Copy again. This time we're going to change the styling of the button. This is going to be primary, so it's a blue colour. And this one is going to be the download. So if we look for the icon, we'll change the name. And the click event. Oops. Copy again. This one's going to be for viewing the code. I'm going to change the style of this one to be a light button, so it's white. click for the event. And the last one is going to be to play a video. So the icon for this is YouTube. I'm going to change the class to a built-in class called button danger. That gives us the red colour. We'll change the name to play video. So underneath the buttons, we've got this content text here. Now this is a piece of HTML that gets displayed in a text block. So we need a text block add-in. Put that underneath here. I'll stretch that down somewhere around there. And we're going to use a different font. This font here is called Graduate. So let's look for that one. There it is. You can also see that the colour is slightly off-white. So we're going to change the create a new class so that we've got that colour. So if we update the code editor, close this off, and then go to the CSS again. And let's create a new class under here, content text. Now the colour for this, have I got this? It's the same, so it's #CCCC. So it's the same as the button text class. If we go back into the designer, select this, and then we'll change this class to say content class. Whoops, content text. So we've got that colour now. Just click the update text editor. And if we go and look at the code now, see this procedure's been updated. We've got all the extra bits in here. Oh, we've not got a named ID on the text block for the content, so we can change that in here. That won't be a problem. Call that text content. And you'll see if we scroll further down, we've got all the click event handlers that we need. I think we've got one missing actually, so let's just go double check everything in the designer. Yeah, you see this one's still got, I didn't update this one. So this one is going to be view code. And this is view code click. Just double check these, that's download, play full screen, play click. Okay. So you may have noticed I've forgotten to update the tooltip for each of the buttons. They're all currently saying play. So let's do that. Let's play full screen. This one's going to be download AOZ project. AOZip. This one's going to be preview AOZ code. This one can be view video. So there, all the tooltips are relevant to the button. Update. And if we run the project, see there we've got all the buttons on there. They're currently not doing anything. And also these buttons are working. So now what we need to do is, as we're clicking these buttons, we want to update this game title. And we also want to add some HTML into this text block content. So first off, let's deal with getting the screenshot for each game title to appear on the screen. So to do that, we need some files. I've created these screenshots for each game title, and I've numbered those 1 to 9. So what we need to do is just copy these into this project. So we'll go to the images folder, paste those in there. Then back in our code, what we want to do is find the button click event, which is here. And we want to store the ID of the button that was clicked. So these are the IDs 1 to 9. So now you can see why I've named them 1 to 9, because what we're going to be able to do is, based on the ID, is display the actual image with the same name. And we're going to display the image in the main game loop, which is here. So let's just copy these down. So what we need to do is store this ID in a variable so that we can access it outside of this procedure. So let's just create a selected ID string. And we'll give that a value of empty for now. And after we've displayed the main screen, we want to display or select the first game title. So we can call this click event procedure directly from our own code here. So we can say title click, and then we'll pass in 1. So that'll basically select the first title. Now we've got this selected ID variable, we need to make it global so we can access that from within a procedure. And the first thing we can do in here is set that selected ID variable to be the ID of the button that was clicked. And then in our main game loop, we can clear the screen, and then we can also paste the image. So we can use a paste bob, and we'll put it at that X and Y position. We'll see what that looks like in a sec. And we're going to use the value of the selected ID string. And that'll basically relate to one of these images in this folder. So if we run that now, there you see, so it's already selected the first title for us. This image is a little bit close to the left, but we'll leave it there for now. Then as we're clicking through these, the screenshots are displayed as we need. Also, as we're selecting these game titles, we need to update the title text here and the text block content here. And for each game title, there's going to be a different configuration for each of these buttons. So I want to hold all that data, and we're going to do that in arrays. So if we go back to our code window, let's create the arrays to hold that data. So we're going to have a title name. I'm going to have 9 of these. We'll have a title content. title play, so that'll hold the URL to play that game. Title download, title video, the last one is to view the code, so we'll have a code string, and we want to make these global. Now you could start setting these manually under here, and you could say things like this: title 1 is equal to Cyblock. But you can imagine there's going to be a lot of code to do that. So a better way to do this is to have that data in data statements, and then we can read those in. So I'm not going to let you watch me type all these in, so I've already got those created here. So we'll just add those to the bottom of the code file. So you can see for each game title, we've got the title of the game, we've got the URL where the game is hosted, so you can play it on that URL. We've got the download URL, we've got the embedded YouTube video URL, and then this is the HTML page to display when you want to view the source code. And we haven't created these yet, but I'll show you where we're going to create those. The only thing that's missing out of here is the content, and I'll show you where we're going to create those as well. So first off, let's get that data read into the arrays. So directly under there, we can do a for loop, 1 to 9, and then we can say read title name. Oops. I'm going to read the play next, and then the download. Next one is video, and the last one is the code. So now we've got those in an array, I can go back to the title click procedure, and then underneath this bit of code there, we can update that title text block. So we can say update, or we can say UI text block, and the ID was txt title. I'm going to set the content string equal to the title name string, and it's going to be the value of the ID of the clicked button, which is val ID string. So if we've selected 1, button 1 has the ID of 1, this will then be the array element 1, which we've read in from them data statements. So now if we run the code, we should see that the title is now relates to the selected title. So let's see how we're going to display this text content here. Now, like I said before, this content here is actually HTML, and this is how we can get these links included in here. So let's have a look at how we're going to do that. Go back to the code editor. Now, as we said before, we've got this array here that is currently not being populated by anything. Now again, you could start doing this and then type in all your HTML content here. But you can imagine for long pieces of HTML, that's going to be quite problematic when you want to make changes. So what we'll do, we're going to create an HTML file for each one of the titles, and we'll load those into the array. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to store some new files in the file system application folder. I've already got these created, so let me copy those in. So these are the files. I'll show you what these look like once we get them into the project. Then if we actually look at these files, so you can see HTML to-do list, it's got HTML in there, and we've got a similar thing for each one of the titles. So doing it this way, it makes these a lot easier to edit directly in AOZ Studio as well. So to read those into the array, let's go back to the main code, and we can do that at the top of here. So let's just create a HTML string, a variable, just to hold the text that we're going to load. We're going to use the load text instruction and the name of the file. So we're going to do cyblock first. I was trying to copy that there, but we'll have to manually type that in. So it's going to be cyblock content.html. And the second parameter here is the variable that we're going to load that text into. And then what we need to do then is put that into the array variable. That's going to be item 1. And then we just need to do that for the other files. So with the magic of video, I've gone ahead and typed the rest of those statements in. So now that we've got those into the array, we can go back down to our title click procedure and add the extra code that's going to update the content text block. So we say UI text block, and it's txt content string is equal to the title content string. It's the same code. We're going to use the value of the ID parameter. So let's run that, see if that's all working fine. There you go. As we click through, that's basically populating the HTML. Now you'll notice that on some of these, there's not always a video, so we want to be able to hide that if there's no video for the title. So we go back into the code, and we can say here, if the title video array of the selected one if that equals an empty string, and we can use a UI hide, next button video, else we're going to use a UI show. Now if we run that, oops, I've got an error somewhere. Is that what I've named it? Ah, it's button play video. So Mayday UFO doesn't have a video. You can see the button gets hidden and it's displayed. So that's how you can show and hide UI components. When we're clicking these buttons, this little pop-up window is a UI component called a UI iframe. And what you can do with an iframe is you can configure a URL that it will load and display inside there. If I show you how that works in the designer. So on here we've got a UI iframe. We pop that onto the canvas. You can set the source here to any URL. So I could put something like I think I've got a privacy policy.html. You can see there that the iframe has loaded that URL into the screen. So you can obviously do this with games as well. So if we put sideblock in there, see there now it's actually loading the sideblock game. So this is what we're going to use to display these pop-ups for playing YouTube videos and previewing the AOZ code. So we'll come out of here. Let's create some variables that will set the frame width and height and the position. And we want to make it, or we're going to make it 90% of the actual screen size. So at the top here, let's add some code. Let's actually turn the flash off and the cursor off. And we're going to set some variables here. So as display width is 1920, display height is 1080. We're going to have a frame width equals 1344, which is 80% of 1920. And we'll have a frame height equals 756. Again, that's 80% of 1080. So the position of this, we just want to make sure we make it in the center of the screen. So we'll set the frame, we'll have a frame X, and that'll be equal to the display width divided by 2. And we're going to take off half of the frame width. And we'll do the same for the Y position of the frame. So it's display height divided by 2 minus off half of the frame height. And then we just want to make all those global because we're going to access these inside a procedure. So there we've got us variables set. If we come down here and we'll create a procedure for displaying a frame. So procedure, call this show frame. We'll pass in some parameters. We'll have the URL. And we'll also have a class. So this will allow us to apply a particular class to the iframe component. So we'll use the UI iframe instruction, and the ID, we'll just give it a name of frame. I'm going to set the X equal to the frame X, a global variable. The Y is going to be frame Y. The width, put a frame width. Height. We'll set the class. And then the last one is going to be the source is equal to the URL that we've passed in. So let's see which one we can have a look at first. We'll do the let's see a YouTube start procedure. Where's the video one? Did we not set that up? Video. Video, click, update the code, and we should have that procedure at the bottom. Let's just take this up here. So when this button is clicked, we can simply tell it to show that frame. So we can call that procedure show frame, and we're going to pass in the title video string, and it's going to be the value of the selected ID. So that URL is the one that we read in from these data statements, and it will be this URL here that's getting passed in. And we've also got this class here. So at the moment we'll just leave that empty, but we'll come back to that. So in theory, when we run this, we should see the video pop up in an iframe. There you go. And then that can be played in there. Now that's all very nice, but we can still see the background, we can still interact with the background. And we don't want to be able to do that. And we want a nice little frame around this so it's easy to see. And we've got no way of closing this either. So let's add the close button first. So rather than having to type the code in to create this button, what we'll use the designer and add this button that we want to create. Now I'm going to change the class to be a button warning. So we'll get a nice orange button. And I'm going to make the height, let's have a look, height, make it about 65, the width about 160, and we'll have an icon on here, and we'll look for a backspace, maybe this one, so that'll be the close, and anything else, just looking at my notes. Yeah, let's create the click event. We'll call it close frame click. Now we're not going to update the project, but what we can do to get the code for this button, if we go to the settings page, we've got this view code button here. We can then look for that button there. We can see, we can copy this out of here. Copy that. Close this. We don't want to update the code So okay to exit that. So in this pair to the code, we can paste that code in here. Just give it a better name. And we also need to recreate this procedure. So procedure, what did we call it? Again, the ID is passed in. I'm not going to use that though, we don't need that. So if that's clicked, we want to basically get rid of the frame. And we've got a user instruction that will allow us to do that. That is a UI delete. We pass in frame. So let's see if that works. Now the position we didn't update, so the position is going to be in the wrong place, but it's over here. So I want to move this to be at the right here. But if we click that, you'll see that the functionality does work. So let's just update that position. So instead of 80, we're going to have, I've already worked these out, so it's 1468 and 105. So that should now position that in the right part of the screen. There we go. That's where it's going to be. Close that off. We also want to hide this button as well. So within here, we can do a UI delete, button close frame. Okay. So next thing we want to do is sort out how we can get rid of these, the interaction part of the background underneath the iframe. So if we go back to the designer, so what we want to do is overlay a transparent background over the main screen. Now we can do that quite easily with using a UI text block. So we can add a text block in here. I'm just going to show you how this works, because these are HTML controls. We can control the order by using the Z index in a style sheet. So to make sure this appears above all the other controls under this control, we can create a new class. So what we'll do, we'll just save this out for now, and we'll go back to our CSS, and we're going to create a new class that we can apply a transparent background on that text block. So we'll just call it fade background. And we can set the background color. And we can set the RGBA to 0, that'll be black. And then the opacity, we'll set that to 0.05. If we save that and go back to the designer and apply that class, see now there we can see through that. And because of the order these are being drawn, it's appearing above that, but that's not always guaranteed. So let's just save this out and we'll go back to the class. We'll just create another one. We'll just call it layer 2. And we'll set the Z index equal to 2. Then we can apply this class as well. That'll always make sure that that will appear above the other controls on the page. So to get the code for this, do as before, we can go to view the code, look for this text block, there it is, copy that out, and then we can get rid of that and update the code. Then scroll down. So showing this frame, we'll add that code in there. Just give it a different ID so it's more readable. And we're going to set the X position to 0, the Y position to 0, and then it's going to be the display width and display height. So let's see how that looks. There you can see, but obviously now we can't select this video because that's underneath. So we'll come back out of there. Then on the iframe video part, you can see that we're passing in a class here. So what we'll do, where we left this an empty string there, we can pass in that layer 2 class, and that'll make sure that the iframe is on the same layer as the background, and because of the order, that will appear on top of that. There you see now, and we can't click behind that because we're actually clicking that full screen text block, so it stops that interaction underneath. You can see also his button is hidden, so I just need to add that class to that button as well. So layer 2. And there we go. Obviously when we close that, we want to hide that background as well. So we can do the UI delete. And then when we close, there it goes. And on my website, you can see in the pop-up, we've got this orange border. So again, that's in another custom class that we can create. So if we go back to his code, go to his class, I'm going to copy this paste in that I've already created. And it's called video pop-up. It's setting the background to black. It's setting the border to 2 pixels. It's a solid border, and it's this orange color. And then we're also putting a radius on the top left, bottom left, and bottom right. So it gives a little curve on the corners. So that class is called video pop-up. So in his main code, what we can do on the video click here, we can add that class in. So we can add multiple classes in here, and that will apply both of these styles to the iframe. So let's see how that works. There you see, so we can see the slight radius. So next, let's get these play buttons working. So back in the code, where we've got the play click and the play full screen. So in the play click, this should be pretty easy now. So what we can do is just show that frame. So show iframe, and the URL is going to be the title play string, and it's going to be the value of the selected ID again. And then in the For the class, we want to use the same, we'll use the same video pop-up class, and also wants to be on layer 2. Let's see if that works. Let's do this one. Did I name that class incorrectly? I'll put a comma in. Don't need the comma. There you go, that gets loaded into the iframe. And it's all fully playable. So the full screen one, we actually want to open this in a new window, or in the window that it's currently contained in. So for this, we're going to have to use a little bit of JavaScript to do this. So first of all, we'll get the URL, and it's going to be the same as this code here. And then put some JavaScript here, and it's just do window.open. We pass in the URL, so we can access the variable this way using the vars. And then the second parameter, you can tell this instruction to either open it in the current window, which is a self, or you could open it in a new window, use blank. So if we try that out now, because I've got it set to blank, when I click on this, it opens a new tab. If you don't want it to do that, you can change that back to self. And that will open again in the same window. It just means you've browsed away from the main site at that point. But you can always click back, and you're back there. So let's do the download button next. So what we'll do here is we're going to need some JavaScript again to do the download, and we'll create a procedure because we're going to need to call this from various parts of the program. So we'll call this download URL. We'll pass in a URL. URL string. Just put a comment in here. So again, this is JavaScript. So I'll just type this in. So we're creating an anchor tag here. I'm going to set the href of the anchor tag to the passed in variable. We can get to that using the vars URL. Then we're going to say document.body, and we're going to append that link. And then we're going to click the link. Then after we've done that, we want to remove that link that we've added to the document body. So we can say document.body.remove child. It's the link. And then just to clean things up, we'll delete that as well. So that's the download. So on the download, click for the button. We can just call that new procedure. Download URL. and it's going to be the value of the selected ID again. So again, the URL is stored in this array. You can see that in the data, it's this URL that it's going to use. Oops, what have I got here? Yeah, I need to pass in the array element, don't I? So title, download, what's the value of that? There we go. So now let's see if this works. There we go, it's downloading the file. So the last on the list of buttons here is the preview AOZ code. So to do this, we're going to create some HTML files that have got the AOZ code in there. And I've already created these HTML files. I'll show you what these look like. So these are the files here. If I double click one of these, this is what the page looks like. So what I'll do as well is I'll copy these into the project. I've also got the privacy policy here, so I'll copy that in as well while I'm doing this. There we go. Now we've got these in there. We'll be able to look at these, see what these look like. So these are HTML documents, and what I'm using in here is I'm using this service to actually prettify the code. So let's update the project to display these web pages. So in the view code, we can basically just do a show frame. And we're going to pass in the title code string. And again, it's going to be the val of the selected ID. For the time being, we'll use the same class as what we've got in here. Now this isn't going to be exactly what we need, because we have got some things missing still. As you can see there, it's brought all that in, but the colour of everything is not what we need. We've got these ugly scroll bars as well. So we can use some CSS again to make this look a bit prettier. So if we have a look at one of these HTML files, you can see what's going on. So there's a script I'm referencing at the top here, and it's running a prettify script using a language of VB. We don't have an AOZ one, so VB does a pretty good job. And I'm referencing this CSS code preview, which we currently don't have in the project. So let's create that now. And to save me typing all this in, I've got everything here. I'll just show you what this is doing. So the code prettify, basically, if we have a look in the code, at the bottom is all this plain text AOZ code. Now when this prettifier has run, it basically tags all these strings and everything else with HTML tags, and then these colors in here, these classes, what applies the color to those tags. So because we've got that reference now, when we run this, we should see the style looks a little bit nicer. There you go, so we can see the comments are the correct color, keywords are the correct color. You can see now the ugly scroll bars have gone and been replaced. Again, that was done with the CSS that I added. If we have a look at the code preview CSS, you can see I've got these classes here that basically change the scroll bar color and the shape and the size of those. So again, you can copy all this code when you download it from my website. So just to finish off, I'll just show you how I've created these links down here. So let's just create this privacy policy link. So we'll go back to our code, go back into the designer. So we're going to use a button for this link. Bring that down here so we can see it. Update the content. I'm going to change the font to graduate. Just resize that a little. And we're going to change the class to button. And it's going to be a button hyphen link. But we also want to change the text to be AOZ. So it gives us that orange color. We also want an icon on the front of this. And I believe the name is going to be shield. There we go. So we can hide this, we can pop this down here. And actually, before we do that, you can see that the text is central. We can actually use the text start class on there to make sure it aligns to the left. Bob that over there. We just need to set the click. We can update the code. Look for that store procedure that's added at the bottom. We'll just move this above the data statements. And then when I copied these HTML files in, you can see that I've got a privacy policy here. So this is just a HTML file with a standard HTML in there. Nothing special going on. And we are actually using another CSS class as well, so let's create that. New file. It's privacy style.css. Now, have I got the code for this? I do. So again, this is changing the scroll bar colors of the iframe, and then it's just setting the background text, and we've got some colorization on a couple of the HTML tags as well, and we're also changing the font. So back in our code, on the privacy, we want to do a show iframe. and we're going to pass in the URL. Now, because it's in our project, we can just do resources / assets HTML privacy policy. And again, the class, we'll just use the same one here. And we'll run that, we should see that pop up nicely. You can see that's formatted nicely in there. So that's it, fully functional. All these work, all these links work. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that's given you a little insight into the UI designer and how you can use it in your own to create your own websites. Okay, thanks for watching.